Welcome to the Forgotten Partner. We are really excited to bring this topic and this session to you. I'm Judy Carson with the State Department of Education, and I'm joined here by my co-host and friend and thought partner, Betsy Laborious. And in this season of giving and gratitude, I have to say I'm very grateful for Betsy Laborious. I was thinking about our Friday Cafe session, and everybody should have a Betsy in their life. She's truly a thought partner. Do you have someone that you go to with a half-baked idea and they just take it and run and it becomes a something? And that's my Betsy. So we're here to bring you this topic on the Forgotten Partner and where are students in school, family, community partnerships. It's something our field does not talk about enough, and the student is the most frequent communicator between home and school, and they really do flavor our relationships. So we're going to dig into that and take an interesting look at how we work with families. I'm so used to it, how we work with students. So with that, I want to turn it over to my thought partner, co-host and friend, Betsy Laborious, to let you know what's on the menu for today.
Thank you, Judy. One thing I do know about family engagement, and I think why our field is so strong, family engagement is, I think it's a field that really needs thought partners. It's really important because it tends to be innovative. It is really good, very helpful to have someone that you can not only share ideas with, look for new things, but just say, does this sound right? Is this crazy, or are we jumping off a cliff in terms of doing this? I think Friday Cafe offers that to people. It really does expand our thinking and, again, our generosity. I'm always amazed at how generous we are with each other in terms of sharing and offering support, particularly right now in terms of when adults really need support. So without further ado, we have a fabulous morning planned for you. Judy talked a little bit about Ann Pratt. Ann Pratt is a director of Connecticut Citizens Action Group, and she's a director of organizing. Ann is one of the few people that we really have invited back to Friday Cafe because of her ideas, her expertise, and her really mentoring us when we think about this whole idea of creating spaces for people to communicate and to listen, and all around community organizing. We educators are really good at building our own little kingdoms, but when we have to kind of stretch ourselves and look out and look for other partners, that is something that some of us do well and some of us will continue to learn. And so I do want to, I want to again thank Ann for being one of our thought partners in Connecticut. And before I go, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to Emma Velazquez, who is our driver behind the scenes, Mary Lou Malloy, who is at Pratt, and our newest partner in the SFEC team, Dr. Veronica Marion. So thank you to you all, and thank you for your support. And Ann, I am going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Betsy. Hello, everyone. I did just stop sharing my screen because I have to be very transparent that doing this presentation and this kind of training is challenging on Zoom. It's great that so many people are here from everywhere, which is wonderful. That's the advantage I think we've all come to appreciate about Zoom. And the challenge is, the last time I spoke with this group, which I think might have been a couple of years ago, in Waterbury at the museum. It was an incredibly wonderful experience. I just walked away from that experience with hope and energy and excitement about being in this community. So I just want to thank Judy and Betsy and Veronica and all those here for inviting me back, because as a process of preparing for today and knowing that I get a chance to be with everyone, it has helped to have me think a lot about this really, really important topic. So without further ado, I'm going to share the screen, but I did want to have a vision of you all as if we were in the room together in person, because I do want to interact with you and I want to hear back, you know, the challenge of finding where the chat is and all of the dynamics, but we will do what we can, obviously, to make this work. And I also saw that there were a number of people who have been here 10+ times. So you may be familiar with some of the concepts and ideas that I'm going to share with us today. But I also want to say that anytime I prepare a presentation and engage in these concepts, I too am changed, that it's always a shifting river. So I hope that this does the same for you. So without further ado, I will share my screen back, and again, my apologies for, okay, here we go. Share screen. All right, so that's me, lovely curtain. So I describe this particular conversation as a conversation about community organizing, our relationship to ourselves and to the young people in our community. I wanted to share this particular photos, which actually, again, in preparation, I was in Boston this past weekend and I went to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and there was this incredible program with this artist, and her name is, it's an exhibition of stories, collages that she generated. She's a resident of Roxbury in Boston, and this was her life. I just found them to be incredibly vibrant, and also centering youth in such a way that was a huge inspiration to me, and helped to kind of focus what this topic is. And I loved her color, her vibrancy. Another piece about that exhibition that I just want to share, the entire exhibition on that floor was filled with a exhibition that was curated by teenagers. They picked out the photographs. They put the little cards on the side describing what the photos meant to them and what it meant to us. And it was teens, the entire, and they curated this particular exhibition by this woman, Koo Holmes is her name. I can send you information about it. It's really quite extraordinary. And when you walk into this Museum of Fine Art, I just wanted to share with you this particular posting, which introduced you to this entire exhibition by a teenager who uses this word Ubuntu, which is many of you might know this word. It's oftentimes complicated and contradictory, many different translations, but this young man talked about the translation that's most used, which I am because you are. Now, I don't know about you, but that particular saying, I am because you are, requires me and calls me to think deeply about that. And why I use this is because I believe that Ubuntu, and I should figure out exactly how that's pronounced, is a term that to me epitomizes community organizing, epitomizes the way in which we can be in the world together. And it's not always easy, it's complex, there's always challenges. And again, this word really causes me to reflect. So I wanted to share that. And I just also love that it was presented by a young student in Massachusetts. So without further ado, I'm gonna start off with you, as I always love to do in this space. And I wanna have you take a moment. So if you all could take a moment, just, I don't know, a few minutes, and I'll call and call on Emma to take us to the next level. But here are the questions I would like you to reflect on. What do you know about the students in your school, family, and community? So to think a little bit about that as deeply as you possibly can. and to think about what's important to them. What is it that makes their hearts sing? What is it, I'm sure we could all think about many of the challenges, but I'm curious to sort of hear about your thoughts and reflections on that. And then if you were to ask that group, that person, that student, or maybe it's a group, to describe what the best school in the world, what would they say? So spend a minute. It might be, some students that you already know. Maybe it's a student in your family, whatever it is that kind of speaks to you. I'm just going to give you a bit of a moment to jot down some thoughts and reflections on that. All right, I'm going to move us now into more about how I see community organizing as potentially enhancing this idea, thought, commitment to creating students as real partners. And so within that context, there is a particular ladder that I use to do this, and I am going to once again share the screen. So the challenge of going back and forth here. Here we go. Yeah, so we just did the pairs. So the next slide is I want to talk a little bit about what I use as an organizing ladder, right? And this is what always grounds me in whenever I think about what is this all about? Why are we doing this? Why am I doing this? How is it that we are as a collective gonna make a change, real changes in people's lives? I have the benefit of working for an organization whose mission is engaging Connecticut residents in changing the relationship of power. Right? So to me, that is the fundamental component. And even though we didn't really necessarily explicitly talk about this, a lot of what I heard in people's description was the relationships of power that students feel, community feels, and we want to unpack that a little bit. But first, what I mostly heard in this conversation, and Judy started out in terms of articulating some incredible principles that this cafe works on. And when you talked about safe places, when you had this description of engagement, in our small group, there was a sense of connection, of a nourishing environment. So these in organizing is basically a conversation about our values. And I start the ladder with values because values are things that oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes is a way of bringing us together. In a time of incredible division, strife, tension, if we all kind of reel back and say, okay, what are we about? What is it that we all feel energized, connected with? The values that started this day that Judy laid out, I'm down with, equity, understanding, embracing, engaging, the values that you just articulated in the chat just now of a vision of what's a great school, what's a great community. I'm down with that. Doesn't matter where we come from, our political perspective. This is how we can sort of begin the conversation of what is the collective we, what's the potential for a bigger we. So I just really wanted to ground that, our conversation in this. So values then, again, I guess gotta. So here's an example that I, have kind of imagined that this would generate, which was transformative, safe, peaceful, some of the things that I anticipated would come about, fulfilling, nourishing, loving, equitable, and relational. So again, many of what you articulated, I think represents some of those important things that I do believe we all can sort of say, yes, I want that. I want that in my life, and I want that for my family and for my children. So the next slide. Again, this probably could be familiar to many of you, but in the frame and the organizing ladder, I experience, and I would imagine many of us have experienced, that oftentimes within our community, within our state, within our society, we cannot fully articulate our values unless we are able to have some power to make that happen. So I am going to stop the share, and I'm going to see all of you here and see the chat and say hello. And I want to just say to you or ask you, so that word power, some of you, you know, I'm curious, what does that evoke in your gut? And you know what? I think that it's quite possible, if anybody wants to unmute themselves, that they can and share what is it that brings this, you know, like, yeah, gut reaction, power. Okay, power equals leadership. Okay, good. Jump on board quick, like, okay, power, what does that mean to you? Change, good. Anybody else have some other kind of reaction? Say again?
Authority.
Authority, absolutely, yes. Who holds
to have an impact?
the ability to have an impact? Who holds the resources? Free will. Okay. Ability to participate in decisions that impact me. Laws, resources, agency. Yes. Information. Okay. And okay, Nick, power can easily be misused. Nick, you want to say a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I was explaining in the last breakout session that this is my kind of second career. I just recently retired as a juvenile probation officer with the state of Connecticut. And, you know, in my 26 years working for the judicial branch, you come into contact with people that, you know, have a lot of power, whether it's judges or police officers, probation officers like myself. And if it's not handled in the right manner, power is a great thing because you can help a lot of people, but if you misuse your power, you're just going against what the that of power or authority stands for.
Right.
You know, here in schools, I mean,
Yep.
you know, we want to listen to our students and hear what they have to say, but sometimes our power can not necessarily allow us to listen to them if we let it take us there.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, that I think kind of, and I'm seeing also in the chat, like both positive, but also challenges. Nick, thank you for sharing that. And I think that that's, I'm going to move through this quickly because I do want to get to a place where we talk about how you might use some of these tools in your own organizing. And I just do have to say, please placeholder this. I do training on this and we spend almost a day unpacking this word power because it's so fundamental to organizing. So I'm going to move through quickly because I do want to get to that space. But thank you for raising it. And I guess before I leave this word power, I want you to reflect as out of this conversation is what is your relationship to power? Right? You've talked about some good things, but then there's also some challenging things, right? And if I were to now say everybody on this call are power hungry people in their community, tell me how you would feel about that in the chat. If I were to say you are power hungry people in your community, what does that, what comes up in your gut? Chat, again, I'm moving through this quickly, but I want to use this. Feels bad, not true, right? It's bad to have power, right? It's bad to have power. Why is it bad to have power? Again, why? And I think that this is something that even people who are in this work all the time struggle with, appropriately so. Okay, Reagan, you nailed it. With great power comes great responsibility. This is so important. And in essence, by the way, my experience of this group and the values that you articulated and what you just shared, it would be great if you all had more power. And I don't think you all have enough power. And that's what organizing is about. That's what this session is about. And we also know that our students have even less power, right? Okay, Ann Henderson, I am power hungry because I feel deprived if I don't have enough. And I want to be a co-conspirator with you right now. That is great, right? To be co-conspirators with people who have the kind of values that you just articulated. and to work collectively to build the kind of power to make the kind of change. If I have power, I want to be someone who shares it with people who don't historically don't. Me too. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And here's the other thing about power and organizing. When those values that we articulated just now, right? I don't know about you, but when my values get violated, what happens? What happens when your values get violated? When something happens that, say, hurts a child or hurts a community? What's the feeling that we have?
Anger.
Angry, disappointed.
You bet. So as organizers and as leaders who want to build the kind of community, that is a feeling, and I think it gives us motivation and energy to build the kind of power, to do the kind of work that we do need to get through, combined with this amazing gift and essentiality of compassion, right? Anger and compassion together, I think is the kind of energy that we need. So I upset, mad, angry, frustrated, and it's because the values that you hold are about caring and loving and doing the right thing. So those two things can be hand in gloves and need to be two hands of gloves, and can be a part of the community with students and parents and leaders that you build. I think it's necessary and important to bring about change so long as you don't abuse it negatively, right? We just talked about that anger, but also compassion and centering those values. All right, so I am going to shift. I am moving through this with lightning speed. So I hope that not too fast, but I'm going to shift a little bit here, back to power. And here we go. So we talked about both the positive and the challenges of power. And what I want to say is the definition of power. And I want us to ground ourselves in this definition, because it's always surprising when we see what it is. Power is the ability to act. That is what it is. So when you ground yourself in that definition, you know, power is all of that. Like, do we want the capacity to act in our communities? Do we want others, right, to act in their communities? Many people use this word, and there's that saying, I think many of you know, it's power corrupts. Or absolute power corrupts absolutely. In organizing, we believe that actually powerlessness is what corrupts more significantly. Being powerless opens us up to addiction, to abuse, to not being able to live our life with agency, with grace. Powerlessness is really what in our thinking is corruptible, and organizing and the work that you do is about addressing that and challenging that. Anything, let's see, I've got a lot of concepts, so I'm going to move on pretty quickly. So the next question along power that we have in our ladder of organizing is, what are the sources of power in the public arena? And simply based, think about who has power in your community. And if you were to think about people who seek power pretty regularly, let's just say people who hold elected offices in your community. What is it that they need to be elected, right? They need organized people and organized money. So when you think about power as the source and building power, these are the kinds of things that we focus on. And this is a key rung in the ladder. And it's going to lead me to the next slide, I hope. Okay, I'm going to stop the share. All right. So we just went through this very speed-related dialogue and run about power and the sources of power. And I wanted to center our conversation in self-interest, because fundamentally, if you're going to organize people and organize money, one of the most important things is to understand our own self-interest in doing that. That is the motivator. We talked about when we have values and those values are violated and there's a lot of anger, right? That can create this desire to create a new world. So what is it in your life? What is it in your experience, in your history that, you know, motivates that kind of energy? And to us and to me, that is an exploration of our own self-interest. And just like power, maybe even more so, this word is complicated. So just as I asked about power, in the chat, put in some gut reactions to self-interest. If I were to call you a self-interested person, tell me what you think. How does that feel? What kind of gut reaction do you have? This is really, really important because I think our sort of pushing back or not dealing with self-interest is rooted in the way in which the dominant narrative articulates that, just as the dominant narrative articulates power. Selfish, exactly. Might be more appropriate to get involved to make change. Okay, realistic, selfish, realistic. So again, just like power, there's negative, self-centered, conflicted, interesting, great words. Yes, this is very, very key. So other things, and conflicted about how you feel, right? Like, yeah, like being greedy or selfish is, you know, rightly so, something that's frowned upon, right? Very confusing. I think it can be good and bad. Exactly, exactly. And just like power, sort of moving away from that and not thinking about what is it that really motivates you in your heart and your gut, and then spending time thinking about that in other people, as long as I'm doing it for the right reason, is fine. Self-management is very important when it comes to our own interests. Interesting, interesting, very, very good. Yeah, and I do think that a part of kind of what the narrative that we live under is that there's like everybody who thinks about their self-interest in this is the most extreme ways is selfish, self-interested. People who you might think about who are self-interested, what name some names that comes up for you? People who you think are self-interested in this world and self-centered, people who are powerful. Hard for women to put self first. That's very, very important. Yeah, self-interest is not always negative. Okay. Board of Ed members, Donald Trump. All right. Donald Trump. A while back when I do this training, it would be Dick Cheney, right? Like that comes up a lot. The 1%, absolutely. So that is, and to Joanne's point about conflicted, even if we know that there's something positive about self-interest, actually embracing that and working that and being clear about that, the names of Donald Trump and all of the other leaders who abuse not only their power, but use their, you know, particular vision and force of self-interest for, you know, what we would say is a violation of our values. This stops us from really reflecting and engaging, just like building power, engaging in self-interest. So I want to now, again, take this to the next level, which is the idea that actually, if you say somebody who is selfish and self-centered, you know, who is really eliminated from that, right? If you're selfish and self-centered, who is eliminated from that is the other. It's just you, right? If you are selfless, which is what we've talked about on the other side, who is eliminated is the self. So our frame for self-interest is actually a relational concept. And to that end, I want to move on and talk about self-interest as a relational concept. And when I challenge this group to actually think about your own self-interest, your story, this is what shapes us. This is the kind of way in which to really think deeply about what motivates me. What is it about my story that has shaped who I am and really motivates? And the more that you are clear about that dynamic and that reality, the better you are, and at least from my experience, the more you can be in relationship with others. So to spend time with yourself, thinking about what is it that shapes me, who I am, both in my past is who I made you, who made me, who made you is in this category, and who you are now. What is it that motivates you and moves you now to do what you want to do? So, for instance, in reflecting about this this presentation, I did, think about, okay, so who's Ann Pratt? Why does Ann Pratt do this work? So oftentimes I think about the fact that I was born into a privileged white family and wealth. However, I had a grandmother, my paternal grandmother, who was born in Germany and survived and did work at the time of the rise of Hitler. And talk about values being violated. She became very angry and distressed, and she decided to leave Germany and join the resistance in this country with her younger brother. And they fought brought Jewish families back to this country. And that was her life. That was her growing up. And once the war was over, she continued on that journey. Even though she married into wealth, she challenged everyone around her to be very clear about how we have this 100% unequal oppressive system. And this was a time in the 50s and 60s. She met her husband, Joseph Lash, who actually was a leader of the Young Socialist Democrats at that time. And it was the time when FDR was president. And she tells me the story of her and Joe Lash, her future husband, doing an action at the White House. And they organized a huge group of socialists to go to have an action on FDR and Eleanor Roosevelt. And they got close to the White House, and they got there and in this action. And what did Eleanor Roosevelt do? She invited them in for tea and crumpets. And as a result, Joe Lash and Truda Lash became very close friends with Eleanor Roosevelt, and that shaped their values, obviously. I mean, that shaped them, and in many ways it shaped who I am today. So reflecting on that gives me energy, it centers me in my ancestors, and gives me more understanding of why I am and who I am and what it is that I do. You all have stories like that. The students that you will engage all have stories like that. To ground our motivation within our history and in life experiences that happen subsequently. So I have many to share. Unfortunately, again, we're time constrained, and I want to get to the place of being able to see how you can use this for your work. So I'm going to share my screen again. Here we go. All right, so again, as you just heard, I reflected on my own past, what shaped me. For you all to do that, maybe you already have, but I always find that I can do this again and again, and I'm like a river. We are like rivers. We change, and my reflections will become new, and they'll become different. And what I am now, my husband died 10, 11 years ago. That was a huge important shift and change for me and my son, and that has brought me to a different level. So so many things to grow and to center ourselves. So so that's about us, right? That's about you. And then the most important thing that I want to leave you all with, and this is, again, I hope what brings you back to your work in your communities, is the importance of one-on-one relationship building and meetings, which is unpacking the stories of others. One-on-one conversations are unique. They initiate a relationship. They explore the self-interest of the people who you care about. And it hopefully creates clarity for you and for that other person about why there might be some synergy, some energy to throw down together and be co-conspirators on our values. Now, these are very intentional conversations. When it was post-pandemic or pre-pandemic, you always did them in person. They were no longer than 30 minutes, if at all possible. They were prearranged, and it is a time for you as organizers and you as leaders to really listen and to ask questions and to be curious about the people who you're in relationship. And they are unique and unusual because oftentimes when you have a one-on-one conversation, you are going to ask people who you have these conversations with sometimes things that they've never really thought of, and that's where clarity comes in. So one time I was in a relationship and a conversation with a person who was very different than I was. He had very different values. He believed that it was not okay for women to be in the workplace. I was an executive director with the Sun. He was very judgmental about that. And I continued to want to be curious about where does that come from, and his own experience of his raising of a child. And he shared a very significant story when I kept being curious. Why is it that you think this? What is it about you and your life story? And he told me about being abandoned as a young child and going into foster, and how angry he was and where he came from, and that he'd never really shared that story in connection to his anger at women being in the workplace. It had to do with his values as well, but nonetheless, we ended up being very close, even though we came from different places, because we had that experience and had continued experiences about finding our values that were really important to us. But it's these one-on-one relationships where your job in this conversation is to be curious and to be bold and to be courageous and to take some risks, because that makes it unique. It makes it different than many conversations. And the more that you practice this and have this, the more that you can do what you want to do in your community. So I'm aware of the time, and I need to have somebody jump in to tell me if it's time for me to really wrap this up so we can get into some small groups. So the question is, for your work, if you feel like you want to create a different experience for students, if you want to create an initiative in your community, in your school, that is really about getting groups of students together and actually having some conversations about how they can be more meaningful, how they can be more engaged, my recommendation to you is find 10 to 15 people, however many people you think you may need, on who else cares about this work. And also, why is it that they care about this work? Find co-conspirators. And you want to be in relationship with, maybe you already are. Maybe you've got a team already who's kind of interested in this work. Go out and do some more one-on-ones and get more people who are thinking about this and thinking about how you can bring this back to your community. I'm going to share an example, and then we can break into, hopefully we have time for some small groups. So I share an example of, I did this to build a faith-based community organization in the greater Hartford area. And I started out with my own self-interest. Why is this important to me? I wanted to create a group of faith leaders who actually could get stuff done. I was a member of a congregation. I was frustrated at what was going on. So I did one-on-ones with 25 key leaders in the group, and we talked about these things. They talked about their values, they talked about their self-interest. From that, they've agreed that they want to build and decide to build an organization. We held a training of their leaders and their congregations, and we did the one-on-one training. there was, I don't know, 100 people who were there to learn about how to do one-on-ones. They did congregational one-on-ones. So over the course of about 6 months, about 1,500 people were interviewed through one-on-ones. And we decided to have a public meeting where we're going to challenge some of the legislatures about doing some good things. We had a public meeting of 1,500 people, and the legislators, there were 30 of them there, agreed to invest $7 million into early childhood at that current budget, which ended up happening. So that's a very quick example of what I use this. And everybody on this Zoom call, if this is something you're passionate about and you want to do, which I think would be extraordinary to have students as partners and real partners in this work, you can do it. And I would love to, continue this conversation. So do we have time for small groups? Betsy, yes, we do. Oh, that's so awesome. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to show you some of the questions that we're going to consider in these small groups. And let me see. Okay, small groups. So basically, very straightforward. What are the challenges and opportunities of this for your work as it relates to making students or having students be more partners in your work? And also, what is the implications for your work? I mean, everybody on this call has a different way in which they're related to this. There's parents, there's liaisons. I'm blown away with the different school systems and different roles that people have on this.
That is very, it's very hard right now to establish a relationship with parents and school and be engaged when there is no physical connection. That really is detrimental right now to build that kind of trust and relationship. We all agreed on that, and as of right now, because of the COVID protocols, there's not much we can do. But it's also difficult for people that the English is now their first language to communicate. In person is much better because of body language. But when it's over the phone or through Zoom, it's not the same connection, and it's a little bit harder. So it's very challenging in that form. And also, as a parent or as the school staff, when we promise a child, like when we listen to them and we promise something or that we're going to do something, that we always have to keep up our word, because otherwise that can put up a wall and they're not going to be able to trust us anymore. If we don't keep up with what we say we are going to do as parents or as community leaders or as school staff. Thank you.
Very, very powerful, Judy. Thank you so much for sharing that. And before we move on, does anybody want to add to that and or respond? Share that experience, build upon that experience of the challenges that students and parents and schools are faced with COVID?
I guess I'll just say something. I wanted to see if someone else in my team would say something. I think one of the most difficult challenges in getting student voice is getting the students who typically don't speak to be represented. We usually hear from the same kids all the time, which is something that we're working on in Stanford and developing a tiered approach for supporting kids that typically don't speak up and get involved. So that I think is a challenge.
What age students are you working with?
Well, right now we're high school, but student voice goes down to pre-K, right?
Right. So this is, got it. Okay. Yeah, that seems like really important work, very important work. And Mike and Judy, how is it engaging, inviting, propositioning students to and or structuring your community to actually be leaders, to take more responsibility? How does that process work in your schools or your experience?
Are you asking me or Judy?
Yeah, you or Judy, or I'm just kind of curious, like, so one of the things I guess I have, a question for you all who are the experts in this is, is there a place for students to feel safe and encouraged and actually have their experience sort of like, if I don't show, particularly for high school students, let's just sort of ground it. If I don't show up in this space, something won't happen. Like, to the degree that we give students the opportunity to really become leaders. Like, does that ever happen? Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, so I don't know the answer, unfortunately. I wish I did. What we're looking at, and there's a spectrum that we looked at that I learned. There's a report that was written by, I think, a university in Colorado that looks at student voice through a spectrum. And it goes from one side being where kids actually participate and contribute by giving us feedback, whether that's surveys, focus groups. Through that mechanism, we can ensure that we're reaching the students that don't typically speak, and that would be it'd have to be outreach to do that. And so that's one side of the spectrum. On the other side of the spectrum, we have students who are actively involved in decision making and policy changes, and that would be like being on the Board of Education, maybe not as elected board members and all that. So that spectrum goes from participating in surveys to actually affecting change, as we talked about earlier, having power.
So powerful. Very nice.
Anybody? And there's a comment in the chat, Jim and Kim from Wethersfield. So they're talking about going to where the students are, and some interesting ideas that include a donut shop across from the middle school. So I wonder if Jim and Kim would come off mute and say a few words.
So we have Jesse Pickett and Jennifer Fell on the line too. They're new liaisons from Wethersfield, but we had done kind of a drive around the other day to the neighborhoods, and one of our principals had mentioned community walks. Since we're not doing parent-teacher home visits, can we go where the students are? And so I think if you hang out outside the middle school, you see where they go. And so we know some of our middle school students go to the corner store in the morning to get candy. But after school, where are they going? And, can you kind of follow that? But I think food seems to get them places, and it could be outside. It's COVID, we can't necessarily go inside, but, maybe thinking about where are your students congregating after school, and if you offer food, would they go?
That's amazing. And then the next question for us, I think, is like, what is the conversation that you want to have with these students? Like, I'd be really curious about that. Like how, and to explore that real conversations with students on what really moves them and motivates you. And many of you might already do that, but first and foremost, thank you, Kim and Jim. Like, got to find them, got to be in a place where they even want to have that kind of conversation. It's great.
I just had my hand raised. I wanted to add to what Mike said.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Sorry. Also from Stanford, I wanted to add what Mike said. Our group talked about a lot of the things that Mike did. And then it made me reflect that some of our student groups, I think you also need, our student voice, you need them to have a space where they can be together. So our Board of Ed just started a student advisory board, and they're trying to get a spectrum of students, but it's nice that some of the students are already part of a club or a group within the school, so that after these meetings or experiences, they have a safe place to sort of process. So for instance, at one of our last meetings, a Board of Ed member made some comments that weren't necessarily nice about the students, and I don't think that was her intent, but it was nice for the students afterwards to have a place to sort of process that. Because if they just speak in these adult places and then really don't have a chance to process, I think we want to make sure we keep our students safe.
So powerful, Reagan, so powerful. Yes.
I have a question. For Reagan and also for Stanford Mike. So would something like this one-on-one teaching, like even young people, to have one-on-one conversations with their peers in order to kind of have some collective experience, is that something that you think would be, an action that the district could take, even with a community provider or training? So that would be maybe Kim first and then maybe Mike or anybody else.
That's what we're looking at, right? Is what Regan was saying, is finding where the kids are, right? It could be after school clubs, getting them there, and but being deliberate about it. We need to hear their voice,
right?
And so, yeah, I think that is a good idea.
And just a question also, do schools actually provide student leadership training? And I just saw PLTI, the Parent Leadership Institute. So, and I think Kim or Donna on the phone, they might be gone, talked about the fact that there was that training. And I'm curious if that's something that people think would be useful.
So I think Regan should say something about it. I mean, we don't want to monopolize the whole conversation. Why don't you talk about the program?
Just quickly, PLTI, if you don't know about, a lot of people here are graduates. It's a start of the state of Connecticut. If you could email any of us, but there's a component called CLTI. It's the Children's Leadership Training Institute. So it's for ages 4 to 12. And we have sites all over the state where their parents are taking leadership training and the students are taking it too. So it's really amazing. Like, I have a group going on right now, and the students, they're little ones, they're 5 and 6 year olds. They want to thank all the essential workers that have been helping at the COVID clinics. So they are doing a project to show appreciation for those workers at the COVID vaccination sites.
Yeah, I also put that in the chat. PLTI and CLTI together are just amazing. I've seen so many wonderful things happen for parents and children. So any intergenerational program where parents and children are learning together, and some in PLTI and CLTI, they're discussing the same topics. And so we used to call it their rides home were quite amazing, the conversations they would have, but they had those conversation starters. And honestly, like, we're all here for children's success, and starting with the children, they will empower their parents to then be involved, which is a wonderful way to start. The other thing is, I don't know if PEP is still doing this, but at one point there was a teen people empowering people, which is another wonderful program to really help parents and children really start to explore their values and who they are and where they fit in this world. And just any type of leadership that we're asking of families, you have to do, you do have to start with yourself first. How do you fit in this world, and where do you want to go to then effectively make change? So I love that program also.
So I'm just going to say thanks, Donna. Thanks, Donna, my friend and co-chair of the advisory council Connecticut Family School Partnership. The Connecticut Family School Partnership is also offering through CERC raising capable young people. So I'm going to put my my email here. If you want more information about that, you should contact me as well. So I'm going to do that. And what I would say, Judy, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are. And I just wanted to say we're kind of close. I didn't know if you wanted, if there were any other comments for people, or we want to share the survey. Please, please, please do our survey. We send this to everyone so that we can get more funding for Friday Cafe. And your thoughts and your comments help us all the time. So it's up here for right now. Thank you, Judy. I just also want to thank Ann Pratt for starting this great conversation and really thinking about, you know, this whole idea of one-on-one conversations, you know, collectively having value, you know, exploring values, and then collectively what we can do together. And I love this idea of young people. And right now, I think more than ever, it is the time to make sure that we're listening to young people. If we can continue to talk about, or even think, let young people know that we care about what they think and that we'll listen, that goes a long way to some of the, you know, I would say what we're seeing as far as despair and hopelessness among young people right now. It's, Judy and I just were on a webinar yesterday. It's really kind of, 1 in 3 kids, 1 in 3 are feeling real anxiety right now. And if we can figure out this as adults, it is up to us to try and figure out this. So Anne, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Judy.
Thank you all so much. I really feel like we're scratching the surface, and it's a conversation, and maybe some roll up our sleeves and practice some skills that might be interesting to people. So we're going to be thinking about that on our end. If that, you know, please, as you fill out the survey, let us know if you would like to continue some kind of conversation about these tools for sharing power, engaging. I think that's really the nature of our business. And I want to appreciate Ann Pratt for taking us through an awesome morning. I know my wheels are turning. I'm going to be thinking a lot about what we did. And thank you for being a repeat encore. As we said, we don't have many presenters that get offered the opportunity for an encore. So Ann Pratt is definitely one of them. We appreciate you all. We will see you in 2022. I believe we're meeting January 21st, but we'll get you the date. So have a wonderful, safe holiday and many good wishes for you and your families.